The woman woke up to the soft glow of dawn sneaking through her small window. Her room was modest, with simple furniture, a small wooden desk, and a piano tucked into one corner. She ran her fingers over the keys, as she often did in the early mornings, not to impress anyone, but because the music filled a space inside her that words could never reach. She had always loved music, but she never thought of it as a path to recognition. It was her secret companion, her way of speaking when the world seemed too loud. Her life outside the music was ordinary. She worked at a small shop in the town, arranging flowers, helping customers, and keeping the place tidy. People knew her as quiet, reliable, someone who would always be there to help. But not someone who would stand out in a crowd. That suited her fine. She preferred watching life rather than being the center of it. The rhythm of her days was simple. Wake up, work, play music, and go to bed. But in the simplicity, there was a richness she alone understood. The town had a way of keeping people in their places. Some dreamed of recognition, some sought adventure, and some, like her, found contentment in doing their best quietly. The woman had talent. No one could deny that, but talent alone did not change how the world saw her. She often felt invisible in crowds, not because she was small or unimportant, but because she had no desire to push herself forward. She was more interested in learning, growing, feeling the music fully. One morning, a notice appeared at the town's music hall. A famous maestro was coming to observe local musicians. The woman walked past the notice many times before even reading it. When she finally did, a quiet thought crossed her mind. Perhaps this was a chance to see what she was really capable of. But she did not speak of it to anyone, not her co-workers, not her neighbors. Talking about it felt like taking the magic out of it. She decided to go simply to listen, to observe, to feel the presence of someone who had reached heights she had only dreamed about. On the day of the maestro's arrival, the hall was buzzing. Musicians from all over the town and surrounding villages had gathered. Some were confident, some nervous, but all were eager. She arrived early, as she always did, when she wanted to focus. She found a quiet corner and sat, her eyes on the polished stage, her fingers tapping lightly on her knees to the faint rhythm of excitement in the room. People noticed her calmness. In a place where everyone else fidgeted or boasted quietly to themselves, she seemed untouched by the anxiety around her. Some whispered about her, curious about the quiet woman with the gentle presence. Others ignored her, focused on their own preparations. She did not mind. She was used to blending into the background, and there was a comfort in that. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, a spark of anticipation glimmered. This was not about fame. Not about recognition, it was about truth, about music, about measuring her own heart against the vastness of the world she admired. The maestro arrived with a presence that seemed to fill the room. He did not rush in with grand gestures. He walked slowly, his eyes observing every detail, every face, every instrument. There was an intensity in his gaze, a sharpness that made everyone feel seen. The woman felt a slight tightening in her chest, a signal of nervousness she rarely allowed herself to feel. But instead of fear, it turned into focus. She remembered the hours she had spent alone at the piano, the long nights of practice, the moments when her fingers danced over the keys and the music seemed to understand her before anyone else did. The maestro began to speak, addressing the room with a voice that was firm yet not unkind. He spoke of music as a living thing, something that could touch hearts, change minds, and even reveal the truth of a person's spirit. He encouraged the musicians to play, not for approval, not for applause, but for honesty. His words stirred something deep inside her. She realized that this was a moment, a rare moment, where she could show herself not to others, but to the music itself. When it was time for the first performances, the hall became a tapestry of sound. Some played with technique but without emotion. Others played with emotion but lacked control. The woman watched, feeling a mixture of admiration and quiet critique. She understood the music in a way that went beyond notes and rhythm. She felt the intentions, the struggles, the dreams of each performer. And through it all she waited, patient, knowing that her turn would come, and when it did, she would meet it on her own terms. Finally, she was called. The room seemed to pause for a heartbeat as she walked to the piano. Her hands hovered over the keys, not with fear, but with respect. The maestro observed silently, his eyes piercing, as if measuring the weight of her experience, the depth of her practice, the honesty of her soul. She took a breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the music flow. It was not showy or extravagant, but it was sincere. Each note carried her history, her quiet struggles, her small victories, her hope, and her dreams. The audience listened, captivated. The room was filled not just with sound, but with emotion. People who had expected a simple performance found themselves drawn into a world they had not anticipated. They could feel the life behind every note, the careful thought, the heartfelt intention. She did not play for recognition. She played because the music demanded it, and in doing so, she revealed herself in a way words never could. When the last note faded, there was a silence so profound that it seemed to echo in every corner. Even the maestro, known for his difficult judgments, was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, applause began to grow, soft at first, then swelling, filling the hall. But the woman did not look around for praise. She simply bowed her head slightly, allowing the music to settle back into the quiet of her own heart. Back in her small room later that evening, she sat at the piano again. The echoes of the day lingered, not as fame or recognition, but as a confirmation of something she had always known, that sincerity, dedication, and quiet courage could create moments that touched the world, even if just for a few minutes. She closed her eyes and played once more, this time only for herself, smiling softly. Knowing that the journey had only just begun, the next day brought a nervous energy to the music hall. Word of the woman's performance had spread quietly among the musicians, though no one had fully grasped the depth of what had happened. She herself did not seek attention, yet there were whispers of curiosity and anticipation. Some musicians were eager to see her again, some skeptical, and others quietly wary. There was a sense that the arrival of the maestro had changed the ordinary rhythm of their lives. Now with her presence, something unseen had shifted in the room. The maestro arrived with the same quiet command as before. His eyes scanned the musicians, lingering on those he thought might have hidden strength or unusual sensitivity. When they settled on the woman, there was a subtle pause, a hint of challenge in the way he looked at her. It was not friendliness, nor was it cruelty. It was the scrutiny of someone who had the power to see through appearances. To measure truth beyond surface skill, the woman felt the weight of his gaze, but she did not flinch. She had prepared for this, though she had not known how. The music she played had always been honest, and now she would need more than honesty. She would need courage. The maestro's challenge was clear, even without words. She understood that her presence here was not to impress, but to be tested, to see if she could meet a standard few dared to reach. When he spoke, his voice carried authority, cutting through the soft murmurs of the musicians. He outlined the expectations not as a guide, but as a test. He wanted precision, depth, and understanding. Every gesture, every expression, every note mattered. The room filled with tension. Others shifted uncomfortably, aware that the woman, quiet and modest as she seemed, had been singled out for a trial that would reveal everything about her skill and character. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar calm settle in her chest. Fear was there, yes, but it was tempered by determination. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, practicing in the small hours, learning not just to play the notes, but to feel them, to live them. She remembered the moments when the piano had been the only companion who understood her completely. That memory was a shield now, protecting her from the doubts that threatened to rise in the presence of the maestro's scrutiny. Her turn came, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The other musicians watched with curiosity, some with envy, some with hope. The maestro's eyes were on her, searching, assessing, waiting. She approached the piano with quiet confidence, setting her fingers on the keys. She did not rush, did not hesitate. She allowed herself a moment to connect with the instrument, to feel the life in the wood, the tension in the strings, the potential in every note. When she began, the sound was different than anyone expected. It was precise, yes, but it carried an emotion that was subtle, deep, and impossible to ignore. She did not play to impress. She played to express, to show that the music was alive within her. Each note was measured, yet spontaneous, controlled, yet free. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of her focus. The other musicians felt the shift immediately. They had seen skill before, but not this kind of presence, this kind of connection. The maestro's eyes narrowed slightly, a sign that he was testing her further. He introduced challenges mid-performance, changing tempo, adding unexpected dynamics, pushing her ability to respond. Some musicians would have faltered, but she adapted seamlessly, listening not just with her ears, but with her whole being. She felt every shift, every nuance, and responded intuitively. It was as if the music and she were in conversation, moving together as one entity. Rather than her alone performing in isolation, the audience, both present and observing quietly from the back, began to sense the transformation. The room was no longer a place of simple recital. It had become a space of revelation. There was tension, yes, but also awe. People leaned forward, listening to the woman who had entered the room quietly, now commanding attention not through force, but through depth, authenticity, an unwavering focus. Her mind was fully immersed, yet calm. There were no thoughts of failure, no concern for judgment. Every movement of her hands, every subtle shift in expression, communicated years of dedication, moments of private struggle, and a deep love for the music itself. She played not to earn approval, not to satisfy the maestro, but because the music demanded it, because it was the truest way she knew to express herself. When she reached the climax of her performance, a difficult section of rapid notes interwoven with soft, lingering tones, the room held perfectly still. The other musicians watched, silently learning, silently inspired. Even the maestro seemed momentarily taken aback, the corners of his eyes betraying a flicker of surprise and respect. She met his challenges with grace, precision, and an inner strength that radiated outward, filling the space with a power that was not loud or brash, but undeniable. The final notes fell gently, like the closing of a door on a long journey. Silence followed, heavy and complete. Everyone waited, unsure if they should breathe, as if any movement might shatter the fragile magic she had created. Then slowly, applause began to ripple through the hall, cautious at first, then growing into a wave of genuine admiration. The maestro remained seated for a moment, observing quietly before nodding slightly, a rare acknowledgement from someone who had seen countless performers and rarely been impressed. After the performance, people approached her with questions, compliments, and wonder. She responded softly, humbly, as she always did. She did not seek attention or accolades. What mattered to her was the experience, the connection with the music, the test she had met not to prove herself to others, but to honor the art she loved so deeply. She felt both exhausted and alive, the energy of the challenge coursing through her veins. That evening, back in her small room, she reflected on the day. She realized that the true test was not the eyes of the maestro, nor the whispers of others. The test had been her own ability to rise under pressure, to face challenge without fear, and to remain true to herself and her music. She understood now that recognition, if it came at all, was secondary. The primary reward was knowing that she had delivered her truth, fully and without compromise. She sat at the piano once more, letting her fingers wander over the keys. The notes carried a different meaning now, enriched by the experience of being observed, challenged, and tested. The music had been both a test and a teacher. She played not for the world, not for applause, but for the quiet satisfaction of meeting a challenge she had never sought, but had risen to anyway. In that space, in that small room, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment, a confirmation that humility, dedication, and courage could transform even the quietest life into something extraordinary. After the day of the maestro's challenge, The woman found herself thinking constantly about the experience. She returned to her quiet routines, tending to her work, arranging flowers, interacting with customers, and walking the familiar streets of the town. Yet nothing felt quite ordinary anymore. Her mind replayed every moment at the piano, every subtle glance from the maestro, every unexpected shift in the music that had tested her ability to respond. The memory of the challenge lingered like a gentle echo, calling her to look deeper into her own strength and resilience. In the solitude of her small room, she reflected on the true nature of the test. It had not been just a matter of playing the correct notes, or of impressing others with technical skill. It had been about presence, about courage, about the willingness to reveal herself fully under pressure. She thought of the fear that had tried to rise inside her, the doubt that whispered she might fail, and how she had met it not by pushing it away, but by acknowledging it and moving forward anyway. That understanding felt like a quiet triumph, one that belonged entirely to her. She began to notice how different her perception of music had become. In the past, music had been a companion, a refuge from the world. Now, it was also a mirror, reflecting her own courage, patience, and persistence. She started to spend more hours at the piano, not in frantic practice, but in calm exploration. She allowed herself to experiment, to feel the tension and release, to play with subtlety and nuance. Each session was a conversation between her and the music, and through it, she discovered new depths of expression that she had never realized were possible. The town, too, had changed, at least in the corners where whispers traveled. Some musicians had heard of her performance and the maestro's rare approval. They spoke in quiet tones, often with a mix of skepticism and admiration. Yet she remained unaffected by the opinions of others. She did not play to impress, nor did she seek recognition. Her concern was always the music and the reflection it provided of herself. That focus gave her a clarity that was unusual. People could sense it, even if they did not fully understand it, despite her calm exterior. The woman experienced moments of inner struggle. She wondered if she could meet the challenges that might come next, if she could rise to expectations she had never sought. The thought of future performances, of scrutiny from others, sometimes filled her with unease. But she faced these feelings with the same quiet determination she had applied at the piano. She allowed herself to acknowledge the anxiety, to sit with it, and then to let it pass. Each time, she felt a little stronger, a little more certain that she could face what was ahead without losing her center. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across her room, she reflected on the idea of humility. She realized that humility was not simply about being quiet or avoiding attention. It was about understanding one's own limitations while striving to grow, about recognizing the value of patience, dedication, and sincerity. Humility did not weaken her. It gave her strength. By accepting who she was, by embracing her own quiet journey, she found a confidence that was subtle yet profound. It was a confidence that no applause could give and no criticism could take away. The maestro's challenge had also revealed the importance of observation. She remembered how closely he had watched her, how he had tested her with unexpected shifts in tempo and dynamics. She realized that performance was not just about playing, but about perceiving, reacting, and connecting. The ability to read the room, to sense the music's flow, to respond authentically to the unseen currents of emotion and intention, these were skills she had only begun to understand. And in practicing them, she felt herself growing not for others, but for the music itself. As she continued to practice, she experimented with different pieces, different styles, and new expressions of emotion. She discovered a joy and subtlety in letting silence speak as loudly as sound. She noticed the way her hands moved more fluidly across the keys, how her body seemed to anticipate the music rather than follow it. Each session became an exploration, a journey into the depths of patience, focus, and self-awareness. She realized that mastery was not a destination, but a continuous process of listening, learning, and adjusting. She also began to understand the power of resilience. The test she had faced with the maestro had pushed her beyond what she thought was possible. She had felt fear, doubt, and uncertainty, yet she had continued. driven by an inner commitment to truth and honesty in her music. That experience had taught her that real strength was not always visible. It was quiet, persistent, and deeply personal. She knew now that future challenges, no matter how intimidating, could be met with the same quiet courage that had carried her through this one. In the following weeks, she observed the other musicians in the town more closely. Some had confidence, some had skill, but few seemed to have the quiet patience and depth that she had cultivated. She did not judge or compare herself harshly. She simply noticed. She saw the value of different approaches, the importance of learning from mistakes, and the beauty of persistence. She felt gratitude for the opportunity to be part of this world, not as a star seeking recognition, but as someone quietly discovering her own potential. The maestro's presence lingered in her thoughts, not as a source of pressure, but as a reminder of what was possible when one faced challenge with honesty and integrity. She began to view his scrutiny not as criticism, but as an invitation to explore her limits, to stretch beyond comfort, and to embrace the unknown. That perspective gave her courage to experiment further, to take risks in her music, and to allow vulnerability to shine as strength. She noticed subtle changes in herself as well. Her posture was more confident, her gestures more deliberate, her focus more precise. She felt a quiet pride in her ability to remain calm under pressure, to meet expectations without losing herself, and to express the depth of her experience through her music. It was a pride that did not require validation, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had risen to the test in a way that was authentic and true. During this time, she also learned to value patience. Music had always required practice, but now she understood that growth came in small increments. In the accumulation of small moments of attention, care, and effort, she allowed herself to spend hours on a single passage, exploring every nuance, every subtle inflection, every hidden possibility. She learned to appreciate the slow unfolding of mastery, the gradual alignment of skill, intuition, and emotion. Through all of this, she remained humble. She did not boast of her achievements, nor did she seek praise. She knew that true growth came from within, not from the acknowledgement of others. Her satisfaction was internal, arising from the quiet recognition that she was meeting the challenges before her with honesty, dedication, and courage. She found joy in the process itself, in the act of creating something meaningful, not in the applause it might earn. By the end of this period, she felt a transformation taking place. She was no longer just a quiet woman living a simple life. She was someone who had faced challenge, endured scrutiny, and discovered her own strength. She understood that mastery was not about being noticed, but about being true to oneself and one's craft. She had learned that courage, patience, and humility were the true measures of skill, and that these qualities could elevate even the most ordinary life into something extraordinary. She returned to her piano each evening with a renewed sense of purpose. She explored new techniques, experimented with interpretation, and allowed herself to be vulnerable in ways she had never been before. The music flowed through her, shaped by her inner growth, her reflections, the lessons she had learned from the Maestro's test. It became a living expression of her journey, a bridge between her quiet life and the expansive possibilities she had begun to discover. In this quiet, reflective state, she found a deeper connection to herself, to the music, and to the world around her. She realized that the test had been far more than a single performance. It had been a catalyst for transformation, a call to rise above fear and doubt, and a reminder that true strength and beauty often emerge in silence. She embraced this understanding fully, knowing that her journey was ongoing, and that each day offered new opportunities to explore, grow, and create with authenticity and courage. The day of the next performance arrived, bringing with it a mixture of anticipation, tension, and silent expectation. The hall was filled with musicians, students, and local spectators. There was a quiet murmur of conversation, but everyone seemed to sense that something unusual was about to happen. The woman arrived early, as she always did, carrying with her the calm focus she had developed over weeks of reflection and practice. She did not seek attention, but she knew the moment demanded her full presence. The maestro entered, his presence immediately commanding respect. He did not speak at first, simply observing the room and the musicians. When his eyes landed on the woman, a subtle flicker of acknowledgement passed between them. He knew, as did she, that this performance was more than an exhibition of skill. It was a test of depth, sincerity, and the ability to connect with the music and with the audience. The room seemed to hush, as if holding its breath for what was about to unfold. When she approached the piano, the weight of expectation was tangible, but she did not falter. She set her hands on the keys, feeling the texture of the ivory beneath her fingers. The instrument was familiar, yet the moment was unlike any she had experienced. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself, letting the accumulated hours of practice, reflection, and quiet courage converge into a single point of focus. Then she began to play. The music started softly, almost hesitantly, as if testing the air itself. Each note was deliberate, precise, and full of emotion. The room grew still, every ear attentive, every heart listening. She did not play to impress. She played to reveal the truth of the music as she understood it. It was a language she had lived in for years, now spoken aloud with clarity and depth. Her fingers danced across the keys, each movement a reflection of her patience, dedication, and inner strength. As the performance continued, the music grew more complex, demanding agility, control, and emotional intensity. The maestro watched intently, occasionally shifting in his seat, testing her reactions with subtle changes in tempo and dynamics. He introduced silent challenges, pauses, sudden contrasts, and intricate passages that required precision and intuition. She responded with grace, not mechanically, but with a sensitivity born of deep understanding. Every variation, every nuance was met with adaptability, demonstrating not only skill, but a profound connection to the music itself. The audience could feel the transformation in the room. It was no longer a simple recital. It was a living, breathing performance that carried the weight of experience, emotion, and authenticity. Some listeners leaned forward, unable to tear their eyes away from the woman's hands and the story they were telling. Others closed their eyes, allowing the music to sweep over them, moving through the space like a tide of feeling. The atmosphere was charged with awe, respect, and quiet wonder. In the middle section of her performance, the music took on a more intense, dramatic tone. Rapid sequences flowed seamlessly into slower, reflective passages. She allowed herself to inhabit the emotional landscape of the piece, letting every note convey the tension, release, and depth of human experience. The hall seemed to vibrate with the intensity of her focus. She played not just with her fingers, but with her entire being, channeling years of unseen effort and quiet practice into a single, coherent expression of artistry. The maestro's gaze never wavered. He tested her further, observing how she handled difficult transitions, intricate rhythms, and subtle dynamics. Each challenge was met with poise, thoughtfulness, and emotional intelligence. She did not rush or force the music. She allowed it to flow naturally, responding intuitively to every shift, every subtle change. The room was completely absorbed, no one daring to interrupt the unfolding masterpiece. As she approached the final section, the music became both delicate and powerful. A combination of softness and intensity that held the audience in complete suspension. The notes seemed to hover in the air, each one perfectly placed, each one carrying meaning. Her hands moved with fluidity and control, guided by instinct and experience. There was no hesitation, no self-consciousness, only the pure, unfiltered expression of the music and of her inner world. The climax of the piece was breathtaking. The music soared, weaving complexity and emotion into a single, unforgettable moment. The audience was silent, caught in the spell of her performance. She did not play for approval. She played because it was the truth she had cultivated through dedication and courage. Every note, every pause, every dynamic shift was an embodiment of her journey, her quiet strength, and her unwavering commitment to authenticity. When the final note faded, the silence that followed was profound. It was as if the room itself was absorbing the weight and beauty of what had just been created. Then, slowly, applause began to swell. It was not immediate, but it was genuine and deep, a recognition of the artistry, the courage, and the sincerity that had been displayed. The maestro remained seated for a moment, allowing the impact of the performance to settle. Then he nodded slightly, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement that spoke volumes. The woman allowed herself a small, humble bow, her eyes downcast, her focus inward rather than outward. She did not seek applause or recognition. What mattered was not the noise of approval, but the knowledge that she had delivered the music truthfully, fully, and without compromise. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of completeness that could not be measured by others' reactions. After the performance, she remained for a time in the hall, listening to the echoes of the music, observing the reactions of the musicians and audience members, and reflecting on the journey she had taken. She realized that the true masterpiece was not just the piece she had played, but the culmination of all the preparation, reflection, courage, and humility that had brought her to this moment. The music was a mirror of her own growth, revealing the depth, patience, and quiet strength she had developed. Returning to her small room later that evening, she sat at the piano once more, not to perform but to reflect. The notes flowed easily, carrying the memory of the day's performance. She allowed herself to feel the full spectrum of emotions: satisfaction, relief, joy, and quiet pride. Yet she remained grounded, aware that the journey was ongoing. That mastery was a continuous process of learning, practicing, and exploring. The performance had been a milestone, not a destination. In these reflective moments, she considered the lessons she had learned. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. Humility was not weakness, but the recognition of one's place in the larger journey of growth and learning. Patience was not stagnation, but the willingness to invest time and care into the gradual unfolding of skill and understanding. And sincerity, above all, was the force that transformed skill into art, connecting performer, music, and audience in a shared experience of truth. She knew the maestro's scrutiny would not be the last challenge she faced. Life and music would continue to present tests, unexpected shifts, and moments that demanded resilience and presence. But she felt ready. She had discovered an inner reservoir of strength, patience, and authenticity that would carry her through any trial. She had faced doubt and pressure, and in doing so had revealed not just her skill, but her character. That night, as she closed her piano, she felt a sense of calm fulfillment. She had created something extraordinary, not for recognition, not for applause, but because it was the truest expression of her experience, her preparation, and her dedication. The performance was a testament to the quiet, persistent effort, the courage to face challenge, and the ability to remain authentic in the presence of scrutiny. It was a masterpiece born from humility, patience, and inner strength, a moment that would resonate in her memory and her music for years to come. After her extraordinary performance, the woman returned to her simple life with a quiet sense of fulfillment. She did not seek recognition or accolades, but she could not ignore the subtle changes around her. People in the town began to notice her in a new way. Some came to hear her play, curious to understand the talent that had so deeply moved the maestro and the audience. Others spoke softly among themselves about her dedication, patience, and the authenticity that radiated from every note she played. Yet she remained, as she had always been, humble, composed, focused on the music itself rather than the admiration it inspired. Her days continued with their usual rhythm, waking early, tending to her work, and spending quiet hours at the piano. But within her, a profound shift had taken place. The experience with the maestro had not only tested her skill, but also revealed her inner strength, patience, and depth of character. She realized that recognition, while gratifying, was not the true measure of accomplishment. The real reward was the growth she had achieved, the understanding she had gained, and the connection she felt to the music and to herself. Occasionally, musicians from the town approached her, seeking advice or wishing to observe her practice. She welcomed them quietly, sharing insights not with grand gestures or boasts, but with gentle guidance and sincere attention. She demonstrated that mastery was not about speed, flashiness, or competition. It was about patience, persistence, listening deeply, and embracing the discipline that allowed the music to speak through the performer. In this, she became a quiet mentor, showing others that dedication and authenticity were the true paths to excellence. The maestro himself returned to the town several times, observing performances and interacting with musicians. Each time he sought out the woman, not with fanfare or spectacle, but with respectful attention. He encouraged her to explore new compositions and techniques, testing her subtly, pushing her boundaries without forcing her. She responded with calm confidence, knowing that her foundation of humility, patience, and courage would carry her through any challenge. His respect was not given lightly. She understood that it had been earned through sincerity and perseverance rather than ambition or display. In her private moments, she reflected on the journey she had undertaken. She remembered the early mornings of practice, the quiet determination to improve, and the moments of self-doubt she had faced. She recognized that every struggle had contributed to her growth. Every hesitation had taught patience, and every small victory had strengthened her resolve. The journey was ongoing, and she welcomed it. Understanding that mastery was a continuous process of learning, reflection, and dedication, the woman also began to understand the broader meaning of humility. She realized that being humble did not mean shrinking or avoiding challenges. It meant recognizing her strengths and weaknesses honestly, pursuing growth without arrogance, and valuing the process over external approval. Her humility had allowed her to face the maestro's scrutiny without fear, to meet challenges with grace, and to create a performance that resonated deeply with all who experienced it. It was this quality, combined with her skill and dedication, that had transformed her performance from a simple recital into a masterpiece. As time passed, the impact of her journey became evident in subtle ways. She noticed that the younger musicians in the town began to approach their practice differently. They observed her patience, her attention to detail, and her ability to remain calm under pressure. Some sought to emulate her approach, not to mimic her, but to understand the underlying principles of dedication, humility, and authenticity. She did not demand their attention, nor did she lead them overtly. Her influence was quiet, yet profound, testament to the power of example rather than instruction. Her own musical expression continued to evolve. She experimented with different pieces, exploring variations in tone, tempo, and emotion. She allowed herself to take risks, to explore vulnerability, and to push the boundaries of her understanding. The piano became a space not just for practice, but for discovery, reflection, and emotional honesty. Each session reinforced the lessons she had learned, that courage, patience, and sincerity were as essential as technical skill, and that the combination of these qualities could create music that touched hearts and revealed truth. The townspeople, too, came to appreciate her in a new light. They saw her not merely as a quiet, reliable presence, but as someone who embodied dedication, courage, and authenticity. Her influence extended beyond music, inspiring others to pursue their own passions with patience and integrity. She remained unchanged in her demeanor, however, avoiding attention or ostentation. Her focus remained on the music, on growth, on the quiet satisfaction of doing her best. Over time, she also learned to balance her recognition with personal boundaries. While people admired her and sought her guidance, she maintained the simplicity of her life, ensuring that her art remained a personal and authentic expression rather than a performance for approval. She continued to rise to challenges, including opportunities to perform for larger audiences, but always on her own terms. Her confidence was rooted not in praise, but in her dedication, resilience, understanding of her own abilities. The maestro, who had once tested her so rigorously, became a trusted observer and mentor. He continued to challenge her subtly, offering pieces that pushed her emotional and technical limits. Each challenge was met with calm determination, and each success reinforced her understanding that mastery was a lifelong journey. She recognized that the true test had never been about impressing others, but about meeting herself honestly, embracing growth, and remaining true to her art. in her quiet moments of reflection. She considered the larger impact of her journey. She realized that her performance had not only tested her skill, but it also created a space where sincerity, courage, and humility were valued. The experience had taught her that these qualities were not merely virtues, but essential components of true mastery. They allowed her to rise under pressure, to create authentic expression, and to influence others without demanding attention. As she played her piano in the evenings, the notes carried more than melody. They carried her journey, her struggles, her growth, and her dedication. Each chord and phrase reflected her inner strength and authenticity. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only met the maestro's challenge, but had also discovered a deeper understanding of herself and her art. The music had become a testament to the power of humility, patience, courage, and sincerity. Her life continued in its quiet, deliberate rhythm. She worked, practiced, reflected, and performed when opportunities arose. Always with the same focus on authenticity and growth. Recognition came and went, but it never defined her. She understood that her journey was her own, and that true accomplishment was measured not by applause, but by the depth of commitment, the courage to face challenge, and the ability to remain true to oneself in the end. The woman's story became one of quiet triumph. She had faced a demanding test, delivered a masterpiece, and emerged not as a person seeking attention, but as someone who had discovered the strength, patience, and authenticity within herself. The maestro's scrutiny had revealed her hidden depth. The challenges had honed her skill, and her humility had allowed her to rise without losing her center. She had delivered a performance that was unforgettable, not because of spectacle, because it was honest, heartfelt, and true. Her journey continued, guided by the lessons she had learned that courage is found in perseverance. Humility is a source of strength, patience is the key to mastery, and sincerity transforms skill into art. She carried these truths into every note she played, every challenge she faced, and every quiet moment of reflection. The woman who had once lived a simple, unnoticed life had been tested, and through dedication, authenticity, and quiet courage, she had delivered a masterpiece that would resonate long after the applause had faded.